Before we get to any of that, I want to say here's to John Lewis, never knowingly unfair. What a great department store that turns out to be, because while, in my view, nasty companies like IKEA, Morrison's, Ocado, Next, Nissan are paying COVID-related absentees, people who go off sick for COVID reasons, possibly just to isolate, they're paying the vaccinated staff who do that full sick pay. Unvaccinated staff get the basic state minimum of 96 quid. So medical apartheid there. John Lewis has bucked the trend and announced today that as far as they're concerned, all staff get the same rates. Full sick pay, whether they're vaccinated or not. Hooray. Hooray for John Lewis. Let's speak to the head of Young Voices UK, Jason Reed. Hi, Jason.
Good evening, Kevin.
That is good. Good for John Reed, don't you think?
Good for John Lewis. It's very disappointing to see that there are so many other stores, you listed a few of them, who are still clinging on to this notion that we need to draw some kind of line between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And to be honest, I just don't understand it. I am vaccinated. I have 3 doses of Pfizer inside me, but I don't get where this disdain and resentment comes from towards other people who have made a different decision. It's a matter of individual liberty. Everyone makes the choice for themselves, especially now that we're very much at the end of the pandemic, when we've got this variant going around, which is by far the most mild we've had. And it seems very likely that any future variants will be just as mild. Case numbers are low, deaths are low, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's no logic at all behind this kind of policy. There's nothing that comes close to justifying the infringement on liberty. I don't know if there's any precedent at all for linking pay to healthcare like this and to personal decisions, but I'm no legal expert. But is it legal? There must be some questions raised about that.
Well, I think the imposition of medical apartheid, turning those who've chosen not to be vaccinated in effect into second-class employees, it's certainly morally wrong. And I've questioned this before, Jason. Is it legally wrong? I'm not sure there's any legal basis for doing that, because people who decide not to be vaccinated are not breaking any laws. So on what basis can you punish them? I don't see one. But it is strange. I think it's a throwback. I think it's to do with the vigour with which the government has pursued the policy of coercing people into getting vaccinated. Obviously, sheer coercion in terms of care homes and the NHS. If you don't get vaccinated, we'll fire you. And in other respects, a kind of cultural coercion, constantly saying, if you don't get vaccinated, it's bad for the community, you're killing your grandmother, etc., etc. And a lot of companies seem to have picked up this mantle and gone with it themselves. It isn't right to demonise and to morally judge people who make a decision about a medical process that they decide not to undergo. It's their perfect legal right to do that. I don't understand why they're being treated so badly.
It's become a bit of a cliche, but we do have to learn to live with COVID. And this is not what that looks like. If we continue obsessing over people's vaccination status, and not just obsessing about it and talking about it all the time, but linking it to their ability to feed themselves when they go off sick from work, then that's not a sustainable way to live. We cannot continue like that. I would imagine that these companies that have that kind of policy in place, where you get a different amount of money when you're off sick if you're unvaccinated, they won't be able to keep it for very long. It just will not work, because they will see lots of staff will quit and go and work at John Lewis perhaps, and they will come under increased pressure from the wider community, from everyone else, saying this doesn't make any sense. You can't treat your staff like this. They have reduced sick pay for unvaccinated staff, as you say, to the legal minimum, which is £96.35 a week, which is a tiny amount of money. That works out at, what's that, less than £5,000 a year, which no one could possibly live on. It's that disdain. Again, they've reduced it as low as they are legally allowed to, with the implication perhaps being if we could reduce it even lower than that, if we could pay you nothing at all, we would, because you're scum and we just don't have any respect at all for your livelihood. It's absurd.
And it is this assumption, this characterisation of anyone who decides not to have the vaccine as an anti-vaxxer. That's not fair. I mean, there was a massive march in Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle and London at the weekend on Saturday. 200,000 people surged through the streets of London, including many nurses and doctors. A load of nurses threw their uniforms down on the ground in Trafalgar Square in a very striking gesture of protest. Of course, there were anti-vaxxers there. Piers Corbyn was there. Unusually, he wasn't arrested. That's usually a tradition at these these marches. That's, of course, Jeremy Corbyn's brother. So there are anti-vaxxers. There are extremists there. But there's a lot of ordinary people who just want their freedom back. So the idea of people standing up, and by the way, there are 6 million of them, saying, on balance, and by the way, lots of doctors have decided to do this, on balance, I'm not getting the vaccine. The idea that they are automatic extremist anti-vaxxers is all part of this demonisation process, and it's a severe misrepresentation of them.
This is exactly the kind of thing we see from the nanny state all the time, and we've seen for a long time, which is now being applied to COVID in a very worrying way, which is that the government looks down on people who live differently to the way they do in Whitehall, and who make different decisions to the ones they would make. And they think, oh, those poor plebs, they need a helping hand because they don't understand it like we do. But that's no way to run a government. They have no right to tell people who are unvaccinated, who've chosen not to take the vaccine, that they must do it, or they're going to have their job held hostage, or they're going to have their ability to still feed themselves while they've gone off sick held hostage. And that's especially the case when so many people still are having to go off work because because a close contact has tested positive for COVID. We still very much have a potential, if there's a particularly transmissible new variant that comes along, for a new pingdemic, where we have all kinds of issues with shortages and with everyone being understaffed because so many people have to stay off work and isolate because someone they know or someone they had, they brushed shoulders with on the bus ended up testing positive for COVID. And even in those cases, this rule still applies, that those companies that have that policy, where you get much, much less money being off sick than everyone else who's been vaccinated.
Yeah, it's, as I say, it's medical apartheid, and that shouldn't happen anywhere. Same deal for the useless, ineffective vaccine passports that still are in use in Scotland and Wales. That's medical apartheid. That's wrong. You shouldn't have second-class citizens in a free country. And it's worrying that getting your vaccines and your booster is now being depicted as the way you act as a good citizen. It's a symbol of good citizenship. And if you refuse to get a vaccine, somehow or other, you're a bad citizen. And that is an unhealthy direction for us to go culturally as well. But as you say, Jason, hopefully we're in the home straight here, and the COVID concerns and such issues as we're now discussing will not be top of our agenda for much longer. Just before you go, I have to ask you, what's your feeling about Boris? I kind of want him to stay, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to. What are your feelings about it?
I think I have the exact opposite perspective. I wish he would go, but I don't think he's going anywhere. He's going to cling on for dear life. He will just drag his heels until the very last second, and I think that might be a long way off yet.
Well, we await with bated breath. We could get news even tonight. If not, I think it'll be early tomorrow. So soon we will find out, Jason. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Jason Reed there. He's the lead of Young Voices UK.